In West Berlin, in the mid-1960s, the post-war generation began to challenge the Nazi past of many of those in power and authority. They protested the Vietnam War and sought radical social and cultural change. Riots and protests were often met with violence by the police. In the 1980s, Stalinism in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union had failed to develop at the speed expected at the dawn of the space age. Indeed, the more developed the infrastructure was, the more the bureaucratic structure of planning hindered quality control and the efficient use and allocation of resources. The various Stalinist countries, instead of creating a unified plan across all the Eurasian continent, were narrowly focused on their own countries. Stagnation was the consequence of Stalin's theory of socialism in one country. In 1985, Gorbatchev came to power in the Soviet Union. He allowed more freedom of expression. The peoples of Eastern Europe expected reform to follow there, but Erich Honecker in East Germany refused to allow the Soviet democratic reforms to be introduced in Germany, fearing it would undermine the authority of the state and the leadership of the bureaucratic apparatus.
In 1989, it was quite obvious for everybody that there are changes there in the air, but nobody knew what time changes will come, and so it was an interesting situation. The expectations were very different, so me and my friends were not really bearing the old system, and so we expected a lot of trouble with the mass of people that bearing the old system. They seem to bear the old system, but it was really interesting for us to see that all the people really were not happy with that situation in the GDR. They want to make changes and they don't want to bear any longer the old system. The expectations were very high, but the expectations were also quite different to that, what happens in 1990. So, well, just imagine if you will build a new house, you will not build the same house as your neighbor is. But we should try to find out how we could improve our system to find an optimum.
I remember that many people had the feeling that it was definitely necessary to do something, to change something, and to stand up for what we thought would be important. Even though we feared that the government would react with violence. We felt that there was no other way to change anything but go on the streets and demonstrate and fight together to change something within that society. And the main things that people wanted to change was more democracy, freedom of speech, freedom to travel, and they also wished to get true information. They didn't want the government to lie to them, so they felt that the official newspapers lied a lot, and they didn't give them all the information they needed. And it was an atmosphere of discussions and change and movement in society. Many people went there on the streets to welcome Gorbatchev and to kind of ask him for help.
Herzlich willkommen also, liebe Gäste aus aller Welt, unter euch die Repräsentanten der mit uns brüderlich verbundenen sozialistischen Länder, die Genossen Michail Sergejewitsch Gorbatschow.
But other people gathered on Alexanderplatz, and then we all started to walk through the streets of Berlin, and people shouted certain slogans. Wir sind das Volk, for example, we are the people. Wen wollt ihr schützen? Who do you want to protect? Addressed towards the policeman. And then I remember that we started out as a very small group of people, but then while we went through the streets, many people watched from their windows, and they came downstairs on the street and joined us. And yeah, and then there were policemen and other forces who tried to prevent us from going into certain directions. And it seemed to me that they expected the people to go towards the wall, the border, but there was no intent to do so. During the 4th of November, the demonstration was a lot larger. It were really masses on the street. The feeling there was that, yeah, almost the whole society would support the movement.
Das ist auch bei mir einfach ein Erleben, dass Dinge ausgesprochen werden, um die es eigentlich geht. Es kommt die Beratung im ZK der SED und es entsteht der Druck, den ich ja in Dresden schon Anfang Oktober erlebe, dass doch das Verlassen der DDR einfach die innere Situation nicht nur der DDR belastet, sondern vor allem auch Ungarn, die Tschechoslowakei und auch Polen. Und damit die Diskussion über die Reisebedingungen von Ost nach West in den beiden deutschen Staaten völlig neu zu stellen wäre. Das geschieht auf dieser Tagung des Zentralkomitees und es kommt abends eine Pressekonferenz, auf der Schabowski erklärt, was auf dem ZK-Plenum ist, und dann kommt diese berühmte Situation, die Schabowski so auslegt, dass es eine gewisse Absicht war. Nach meiner Überzeugung war es seine Absicht so nicht. An dem Abend ist die Führung der SED und der Regierung der DDR handlungsunfähig. Und entschieden werden die Ereignisse dadurch, dass an der Grenze, vor allem dort ist der Beginn auf der Bornholmer Straße, ein Major der Grenztruppen sich entscheidet und sagt, wir lassen die Menschen durch, und gibt den Befehl für seine Truppe am Stützpunkt, keinerlei Schritte, die eigentlich dem Befehl entsprochen hätten, die Waffe zu nehmen, um den Grenzübergang zu schützen und Übergänge zu verhindern. Der Beauftragte der Regierung für Informationen gegenüber Presse, Rundfunk und Fernsehen sollte früh um 4 Uhr diese Mitteilung der Öffentlichkeit übergeben, und um 10 Uhr, wenn dann die Volkspolizei ihre Ämter öffnet, sollten die Bürger dahin gehen und sollten sich anstellen und ihre Papiere bekommen. Aber so ist Geschichte eben nicht zu bürokratisieren. Sie hat auch ihre eigenen Zufälle und sie hat auch ihre eigenen stürmischen Ereignisse.